Hello, and welcome to the newest show, the College Football Complication, which we're going with right now as we try to uncomplicate everything for you in this crazy year that we've had of 2025. I'm your host, the best podcast host in the universe, Steve Cully, and with me, the Rock himself, the Rock Pile, Rocky Corigliano, coach and also content creator who has plenty of shows out there and knows his football quite well. Rock, nice to finally see you.
You know, I appreciate you having me on. It's funny because we're two local guys who follow each other, but we've never actually met. So this is the first time we get a chance to talk some ball, and I love talking college football.
I know, and that's the most interesting part of it all. We've never met before, and we're finally getting a chance to see what each other's thinks and go over each other's experience and try to untangle this mess that's been going on. But first off, everything has really changed significantly since the transfer portal, the NIL, the schools being able to pay kids, the athletic departments up to $20 million a year, which I can't get over. And we've seen that schools now really have less patience with a lot of coaches. I mean, you're seeing between 40 and 60 transfers a year. You're seeing so much money change hands. You're seeing the billion-dollar television deals. How much do you think that the transfer portal has changed the game for everyone?
Well, I think just by looking at Indiana and Kurt Cignetti, I mean, when would we ever see the day in college football that Indiana is relevant? They're number one and number two in the country. However you want, we'll get into that. But then you look at a coach like Cignetti who decides to stay at Indiana.
Yeah.
Instead of going to all these schools that have all this money, like we have an Indiana coach in football they've been horrendous for years, right? Turning down Penn State, turning down LSU, turning down Florida. Like I never thought I'd see the day that in our generation that we'd see a coach at Indiana. But I think it goes to show you how much money that these schools have through TV deals, right? The Big Ten and the SEC, who I still think at some point in time are going to have their own playoff, their own national champion, those two conferences. But I think how you can build rosters now, it doesn't matter what school you go to. You can go to, and I'm just using the Indiana piece, but you can look at Texas Tech. You can look at Ohio State last year that spent $20 million on a roster to maintain a roster, similar to Michigan a few years ago when they won the national championship. But just to see how fast you can turn a roster with the transfer portal, with the NIL, is amazing. I never thought we'd see it, but it's just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Vanderbilt, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, they had the largest buyout in history with Jimbo Fisher, and they turned things around. It's just amazing to see. And then you see the flip side of it with LSU, who spends $18 million. Brian Kelly gets fired right into it. You see what happens at Virginia Tech, where they don't spend a ton of money, and Brent Fry gets fired, and there's just not a lot of patience. Billy Napier, I mean, he did get 3 years at Florida. He had everything he needed to. He went into the portal. It just didn't work out. It just seems like it's such hit or miss when you get these kids, because it's not like regular recruiting where you spend months and months and months on top of them. You get a month window in the portal, and now there's only one portal, which is going to open in January, that's going to change things significantly. There's not going to be that second portal. So I think because the coaches not knowing the kids, not building that relationship, and you see early on, they don't gel right away. It takes a while because there's no preseason in college football, and they're not gelling. But do you think that going to the one portal system is going to work? And do you think it's going to last? Because I've heard people say that they're one lawsuit away from going back to two portals.
I would agree. I don't think it's going to last. But I think what's crazy is, and you just mentioned it, is when I look at Ohio State that won it last year. They spent $20 million to keep a team that had a lot of experience that won a national championship. The year before that, Michigan had spent money to bring guys back for a fourth and fifth year. So I'm kind of looking at those two teams, and I'm going to admit this, and I hate to say this. Penn State was my pick to win the national championship this year going in, only because, I'm a Big Ten guy, but only because I thought that the way they constructed to bring everybody back in that roster, they were bringing back an experienced offensive line. They had the quarterback coming back. They had Kaytron Allen, both backs were coming back. I thought the way they constructed that team with the money, I for sure thought that that's how you were going to have to be built. But when I look at these teams today, with this money, and I look at the coaches, I look at some of the coaches, and I take Lincoln Riley, that I think is a really good example. USC spent all this money to get Lincoln Riley, who I still think the school is being patient because he's got a lot of heat on him. I didn't think he would be back this year after the season they had last year. And now, I'll be honest with you, if they win the next two games and find a way to go in and beat Oregon this week and win out, they're going to the playoff. And I think Lincoln Riley's made a lot of good changes. But again, the way the NIL is today with all this money, these coaches' buyouts are $50 million. And then what people are forgetting, not only is it $50 million to buy the coach out, you're not talking about his staff.
Yeah.
It's probably going to cost Penn State. Well, I just saw today, it's only going to cost Penn State $9 million because $40 million is going to go because he got the Virginia Tech job. So they got to steal there. But you got to factor in all these assistants they're going to probably go to. So you're looking at about $100 million to get rid of a coach, not counting the money to bring in the coach, which is even crazier.
They did a study, I think, over the last 8 or 10 years that colleges have spent around $500 million in dead money paying coaches not to coach. And that was always my dream job when I was at Holy Cross. I wanted to get hired by a big school, get fired, get paid 3 years for just millions of dollars just not to coach. It's just crazy to me that you see that happen.
I don't know, Steve, what you think about the whole James Franklin thing, because a lot of people, and I think I'm like you, pay me $50-something million to go away. But in a way, give James Franklin a lot of credit because he could have easily sat back, collected a huge paycheck, but he said, you know what? I'm going to go do what I've done for 30 years, and that's coach college football. So instead of getting paid out $50-something million, he's going to get paid $9 million. Now, he's going to make $40 million at Virginia Tech, but you and I sitting back, and everybody's probably saying, the guy's crazy. Look at Coach O. Coach O said they couldn't show me the door quick enough.
He was out the door. He was on the beach before you know it. He was right there. And I think James Franklin got a raw deal at Penn State. Yeah, I know agree. He didn't win the big game, but he had Drew Aller. He got injured. They went into the portal. They're in the Big Ten, and that's the problem with these super conferences that we're seeing. The SEC is complaining because they want to make sure they get 5 playoff spots. The Big Ten wants 4 playoff spots. And they play each other and they cannibalize themselves. It's going to be very difficult for teams to come out undefeated, teams to come out with 1 win. You're going to have teams with 2 losses. You're going to have teams possibly for the first time ever 3 losses getting into the playoffs. And they're looking to expand it. They're looking to expand everything. And
I'm a little disappointed in the Big Ten this year because I think it's top heavy. I don't think there's a lot of good mix this year in the Big Ten. And, when you look at the SEC, they're talking this morning on the way in. I'm listening to Texas, a 3-loss Texas team, has a good chance still to make the playoff. And I'm saying, are you kidding me? 3 losses. But when you look at the Big Ten and you look at the top part, I would say this. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the rankings, and I'm trying to turn my TV on so I can see when it comes out. But I would almost argue and say I think Indiana should be the number one team in the country because I still think they have the best win in the country is they went into Oregon and beat Oregon. Ohio State's win over Texas week 1. Texas is, 3 losses. Ohio State really hasn't been challenged. And my wife's a Buckeye, and I'm a Michigan fan, so we go at it all year. She's got bragging rights last year, but we beat them for the last 4 years. But I would argue and say Ohio State's done what they're supposed to do this year. They haven't played anybody.
They can't control. Oregon. I mean, they can't control who they play. But yeah, you're right. Their strength of schedule, which the SEC fought hard to implement into this year's playoffs, because they believe they have the toughest conference and they didn't want to lose out on getting some teams in. But yeah, Ohio State is taking care of business. They're going to beat Michigan, I believe. I know it's a rivalry game. I think they're going to beat Michigan. And then it's going to be them in Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, but I think it's going to come down to I think Indiana can play with Ohio State. I really do. I think for me, I want to see Ohio State down in the fourth quarter in a really close game. I mean, the quarterback, Julian Sains, played really well this year. Great weapons on the outside, right? Arguably the greatest receiver in the country in Jeremiah Smith. But I want to see when it's crunch time, if it's a close game late, I want to see what the freshman kid can do. 2-minute drill, down a touchdown, or need a field goal, a drive late in the game. I'd love to see that. But again, I'm more interested to see the USC matchup because I think if USC beats Oregon this week, I think USC wins out, and I think USC is probably that fourth team, and rightfully so. I mean, Ohio State's a two touchdown favorite against Michigan. They should. Right. Ryan Day has a Michigan problem. Ryan Day has a huge Michigan problem. He always has. And how crazy is it to think, and again, I'm the Michigan guy, that last year they were ready to fire Ryan. If Ryan Day didn't win the national championship last year,
he was out.
I think he was out. And it's crazy to think that.
Yeah, no, they had enough. They had enough. That's the one game, if they went 1-12, 1-11, and they beat Michigan, I think they would be happy. But I think he did a great job bringing in Matt Patricia. Yep. He really changed that defense around, and they have stymied people. I mean, they've been all over the place. I'm not an Ohio State guy. I've never been a huge Big Ten guy, but they have won me over the last couple of years, and especially with some of their hires. Chip Kelly, he's with the Las Vegas right now, but I think Matt Patricia going there was huge. The question I have is what is going to happen with the ACC? Because the ACC right now is kind of a mess. Mm-hmm. We don't know who is going to get a playoff spot, who is going to end up in the championship game. There's so many different scenarios, between Virginia, I even heard Duke being in there. Who do you like in the ACC right now? And obviously it's not Bill Belichick.
No, it's not Bill Belichick. Although I'd like to have Bill Belichick's life and his money sometimes, but
and Jordan.
Yeah, exactly. I like Georgia Tech. I love Georgia Tech, and I think what's crazy is I keep seeing all these polls is like some of them have Miami in the projection in the field. Miami's not even going to probably play for the ACC championship. No. So I'm sitting here saying, how are people putting them? Now, they have the head-to-head over Notre Dame. So if Miami and Notre Dame both win out, which Notre Dame should, because this week they play Syracuse, and then I don't know who they have.
Stanford, I believe, is their last.
Stanford. Is if they both have the same record, the way this committee has put teams in, they're really looking at the head-to-head stuff. So would they put a Miami in over Notre Dame? I don't know, but I like Georgia Tech. I'm a huge Brent Pry guy. I think he's done a fantastic job over there at Georgia Tech. I love Haynes King, the quarterback there. I think he's been phenomenal. But when would we ever see a Dabo Swinney Clemson team at 5-5 or 5-6 or something crazy like that? It's just crazy in the world we live in when Clemson was playing for a national championship, or Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State when it was the 4-team, just to see how far Clemson has fallen off. And I don't know, maybe they'll keep giving him another year or two, but things have definitely changed.
He's got another big buyout, but I think that if he were to choose to go to another school, that would reduce things. And they may be banking on that or hoping for that. And then, you have the group of 5. If there's a group of 5 team that's ranked, and right now it could be North Texas, it could be Navy. Who knows who it's going to be? But they're going to get one team in, and they'll probably be the last seed. You're right. They're still projecting Miami, and you're right. I don't see them getting into the ACC championship game, but we've also seen situations before where the teams who get in to the championship, the one that loses out.
Yep.
The one that didn't play in it.
Yeah,
and that always cracks me up. They're not good enough to get into the championship game. They lose, and then somebody leaps them by not playing.
Yep,
that's crazy.
Georgia Tech's going to play Georgia in the rivalry game at the end of the year, and I mean, if they lose and it's a 2-loss Georgia Tech team, they still only have 1 loss in the ACC. They'd still play for the ACC championship. But I think what's crazy is the way this committee and parent is set up this year. Whoever wins the ACC, it's not guaranteed that the ACC gets a spot.
No.
And I don't have a problem with that because the ACC is down this year. But again, I think it's similar to the year when Florida State? Yep, when Florida State goes undefeated and they don't get in because their quarterback broke his leg. And that would have probably been the only time I would have said the ACC should have got a team in undefeated. But I think it's just crazy to see how far down the ACC's come.
And then, the other big news is about Lane Kiffin. Everyone wants Lane Kiffin. There's so many power jobs open right now. There's not a lot of qualified guys who can take them and run with them. Lane Kiffin is considered one of them. I've noticed in his interviews, he's said how much he's loved Ole Miss, but he has not committed to them. Apparently, there is a extension on his desk ready for him to sign, but they don't have the resources that a Florida does. They don't have the resources that LSU does. And especially at a time where they could be competing for a national championship. Could he leave? Because they're putting pressure on these guys. I mean, they came right out and said, hey, you got until the Egg Bowl to make a decision. Either you're with us or you're not. And I can't imagine him leaving before the playoffs and it turns into a fire sale, because now you see the teams, all the kids have 30 days to enter the portal when their coaches quit. So, he could be actively recruiting his own guys who he wants to bring there. And Ole Miss, one of their best seasons ever. I think this was his 4th 10-win season or 3rd 10-win season.
Yep.
And it's been the 3rd in the last 50 years. And you're going to let him go. And when you have a chance to win the SEC, to possibly make a run in the playoffs, you're going to leave that. That blows my mind a little bit as a coach, that you put all that time in. You've had these kids buy into you, buy into your program, buy into family. And, oh, by the way, I got offered, they rolled the Brinks truck up to my house, and I got to go to Florida.
So, Steve, you may remember I played at Fordham my my second year. I played for a guy by the name of Dave Clausen.
Of course.
I always brag about Coach Clausen, and I learned something a lot from Coach Clausen. But when Dave Clausen got the Wake Forest job, he could have had a lot of other bigger jobs than Wake. And I go back and I say this because I'm thinking of Lane Kiffin here, because I would say if you can go somewhere where if you win 9 or 10 games, like if Dave Clawson won 9 or 10 games, and when he did, he was a hero.
He was.
It was a comfortable spot for him. He was still making good money. And I look at Lane Kiffin, and if you read all the things on Lane, and I've been on the Lane train for a long time, I love him, is he's in a good spot in his personal life. He's got a really good relationship again with his ex-wife. He's not drinking anymore. He's sober.
Correct.
His son Knox is playing high school football. He gets a chance to watch his son play. He makes $8 to $9 million a year. It's his third 10-win season. He's got a shot. They're going to the playoff. They'll win the Egg Bowl, and then they'll get into the playoff. Why would he leave?
Yeah, it just seems like a horrible situation to take off on that team. His daughter goes to Ole Miss.
Yep.
And, he had been jumping around. He was, with the Raiders. Then he had the year at Tennessee that was a disaster. Then he goes to USC. Then I believe he went to Alabama and rehabilitated himself as the coordinator until he was in negotiations with Florida Atlantic for that head job. Goes there, wins 10 games, I think, for 3 years, and gets hired at Ole Miss, and the rest has been history.
I don't think he
really
leaves.
turned that program around.
I think he stays. I think he's happy. I think they'll give him $10, $12 million a year. Now, I will say this. From what I'm reading, they're saying that LSU is probably the front runner, and I'm hearing that he may get offered anywhere from $18 to $19 million a year, which would be insane. But I'll tell you who's the guy who I think's a star, an upcoming star, and you're going to know him extremely well. Bob Chesney is a star in the making. Holy Cross guy, right? East Coast guy. I saw on Twitter somebody mentioned UCLA. I hope that doesn't happen because he's an East Coast guy. I think UCLA, unless he's got West Coast ties, I don't know. I think the Penn State job, if I'm Penn State and I had to make a call, I would call Bob Chesney. I would bring him to Penn State because I think he's a star. Who else are you going to get to go to Penn State? You hear all the hotshot coordinators, right? I hear Brian Hartline at Ohio State. You hear Marcus Freeman. He's not leaving Notre Dame to go there. I think Freeman will leave to go to Ohio State where he played. But who are you going to go get that's going to win you? Basically, you're saying to Penn State fans, you got to win the national championship. You got to beat Michigan. You got to beat Ohio State. That's in the outcome. That's what got James Franklin fired. But if I'm Penn State, he's the first guy I call, and I find a way to bring him. He's an absolute star in the making in college football.
Yeah, Chesney is phenomenal. I mean, he started when I was there. He was at Assumption Division II, did a great job, came into a very, very challenging situation at Holy Cross, turned them around, went to the playoffs, went to the finals. I think he's climbed the ladder, and he takes the JMU job, turns them around. I think they're 11-1 or 10-1. They're having a great year. He's done great ever since he's been there, and he would be a phenomenal hire for any of these programs. And I think that if you're looking for a younger guy, someone who's going to commit to you, someone who's going to stay for the long term and not chase the money, I don't think it's him. I think if he were to get one of those Power 4 conference jobs, I think he would absolutely take it. But looking at the rankings, I kind of agree with you. Indiana at number 2, it maybe is a toss up between Ohio State, but Indiana, with their strength of schedule, they do have the better win, and I think that they will give Ohio State a run for their money, and they could end up number 1. And it would be, again, back-to-back years of 10-win seasons that we've seen from them, which is like it hasn't happened in 50 years. We never thought in a million years Indiana would be as good as they are.
But it was interesting. who's interesting too, though, is when you look at the resumes, a lot of people you can probably make the argument that Texas A&M, who back early in the season, I think it was week 3, went to Notre Dame and beat Notre Dame. It was early in the year.
Correct.
They got wins at LSU. I know that doesn't seem great, but they beat LSU early in the year. They won at Missouri, and they won they play at Texas at the end of the year. So if you look at that schedule, at Notre Dame, at LSU, at Missouri, at Texas, that's a really good resume for Texas A&M. And again, Ohio State, week 1, it seems like forever ago, a Texas team that Arch Mannon's first start,
Looked
3
awful.
loss Texas. It just doesn't look as good as an Indiana win over Oregon on the road, and it doesn't look as good as a Texas A&M. And you can argue right now that Georgia's playing as good as anybody.
Georgia is playing as good as anyone, and it's going to be interesting to see how the committee values everything and how it shakes out, and if they get everything right. I mean, everyone's going to have a gripe about certain things, but Georgia has really turned things on and been impressive. They have been impressive. They needed the win at Texas A&M. Texas A&M had the biggest comeback in school history to beat South Carolina. And, Georgia has to play Georgia Tech. Yep. That's their rivalry game. And that is the one that they need to win. And I think if they take care of business there, they're going to do some damage. And we saw last year that the teams that all got byes lost in the first round, the second round, when they got the byes. The byes hurt them. The teams that played continuously and didn't have a ton of time off were the ones that got rolling. And, especially Notre Dame. And that goes back to, like, James Franklin, to me, he makes it to the national semifinals last year. I would think he'd get a mulligan for this year. I would think that, they would not have canned him as fast as they did. I know the expectations were high, but with his buyout, with his resume, I know he hasn't had a ton of success against the top 10 or the top level schools, but he still had a great record there. And I really thought they pulled the trigger on him too fast. And that's what we're seeing teams do now much faster than before, because they want to get these search committees in. They want to identify candidates. They want to have people in place before the early signing date. The early signing date changed everything too, in December. And that's the other thing. We're seeing less and less freshmen get recruited. I know at UConn, we're only taking 12 to 13 freshmen, because Mora has always been a transfer portal guy, and that has been hurting a lot of freshmen. They've been forced to go to lower level programs and move up. And then, I've seen guys transfer 2-3 times, and that just blows my mind how they can do that. But it's just about where they end up, where they start. They may not have started at the right place because they weren't getting recruited as much as a freshman.
What's crazy is back when we played, obviously it was like, you'd send your tapes in to get recruited. I remember my dad sending my films everywhere.
VHS.
Yep, the VHS films. And it's like, now when you look at it, it's like if you're a college coach, it's like, do you want to take the third year transfer, the fourth year transfer? Do you want to take a shot on the freshman kid, right out of high school? You're going to take the shot on the kid that's been playing college ball for the last 3 or 4 years. I don't think it's right. I mean, I have a young son. I think it hurts a lot of the young kids. But going back to you made the comment on James Franklin too about he got a raw deal, which he did. However, if you go back and you look, he was a field goal away from playing for a national championship. Yep. They were beating Oregon before they went to overtime and they lost that game. That they took him to
Double
overtime where
overtime.
they were still winning that game. 2 weeks after that, he got fired. But
That's what I couldn't believe.
It's crazy.
It
But
was
it's
three
those rivalry
weeks.
games.
3 weeks gone. And I'm glad that he landed on his feet. My question is, what do you think about the Brian Kelly situation? They're apparently contesting his buyout at LSU, and he may have to sue them to get his money because they're saying that he is going to be fired for cause. What that cause is currently unknown. They were supposed to notify him within 7 days, which they did not do.
Nope.
And they're doing everything possible to avoid paying that buyout of his, which was $53 million. They offered him a couple lump sums that he turned down, but they stopped negotiating, and the governor got involved, which I thought was crazy. And now you're talking, if they have to buy out Kelly and they're going to pay $18 million for a new head coach at Louisiana, that ain't cheap money.
Yeah, I think it's a bad look on both. I think it's a bad look for the university. I was never a huge Brian Kelly guy.
No.
Just by reading how he's treated coaches, assistant coaches, and you see on the field him screaming in somebody's face. And the one thing I never liked about him was when you listen to the press conferences, and I always listen to the press conferences. I love listening to the coaches talk. Even when they get new jobs, I'll be listening to all these press conferences. He's always pointing fingers at everybody. How about
he's always got an excuse.
It's my fault. I'm the head coach. I run the ship here. All the decisions come through me. Like you're the guy in charge, and it's always everybody's fault but his. But I agree with you. They're going to pay all this money in a lawsuit. They paid him to go away. They're going to have to bring on a new coach. LSU's got a lot of money, but it's not a good look for the university right now.
No. They look bad. The governor's getting involved. I know they recently named a new president. They named, I believe, an interim AD, but the interim AD is going to be part of the search. The other question I had, Alabama has turned things on. They've been playing better, but they are a 2-loss team, and they are currently slated to get into the playoffs. Their last game is the Iron Bowl against Auburn, who fired Hugh Freeze.
Yep.
Do you think a 10-2 Alabama team should be getting into the playoffs?
Well, I think they're not going to play for the SEC title. I love Kalen DeBoer. I thought he was a good hire for Alabama, but I'm hearing some rumblings that he's interested in some of these other jobs. I mean, you're going to follow Nick Saban. No matter, you're going to lose a game, they're going to boo you. They're going to say you're not the right guy. I think he is the right guy. I think he's a hell of a coach. I think he's a hell of an offensive guy. But I think it depends on where the committee puts them. Again, there's going to be a lot of 2-loss teams at the end of the season. And I think they're going to weigh the SEC strength of schedule because, again, I think the SEC top to bottom is better than the Big Ten.
Top to bottom, yes.
After Ohio State, after Indiana, you can throw Oregon, maybe USC if Michigan wins out and they beat Ohio State at the end of the year. But if USC does too, USC beat Michigan head-to-head. So you may only see like 3 Big Ten teams in. I would argue and say that if Alabama's a 2-loss team at the end of the season, the name on that jersey, the Alabama, I think will get them in. It'll be interesting to see tonight how far the committee drops them in the rankings.
What did you think? Because, they've also had BYU and Utah in a couple of the last 2 spots and some of the projections. BYU is 9-1. They have had a very good season. They haven't played the toughest schedule. They would be technically bumped out of the field if the ACC champion was ranked ahead of them. And then you also have Utah, who's sitting at 8-2, and they have played a tough schedule. They would lose the head-to-head tiebreaker against BYU. They beat Cincinnati, which was one of their good wins until Cincinnati lost to Arizona. That dropped them out of the top 25. Texas at 3 losses. I have thought Texas has looked horrible all year long. I don't know what it is about Arch Manning, and you're a quarterback. You have quarterback experience. He doesn't seem comfortable back there. He seems like obviously there was a ton of pressure on him coming in, and now he redshirted. He got a chance to play. He hasn't delivered. He was number 1 on Mel Kiper's big board, on so many people's draft big board coming out. What do you think has contributed to him having somewhat of an off year?
Well, I think the number one thing is, first, I was the guy last year that I said if I was Sark, I would have played him earlier than he did last year because I thought he was the better athlete than Quinn Ewers was. However, when you think about it, coaches have certain packages for quarterbacks, right? You have a running quarterback sometimes, and you have the throwing quarterback sometimes. He got Arch in last year, but when Arch played last year, there were certain packages for him. The playbook was really thin for him last year. Now this year comes in, the playbook's wide open for him. It's a whole different game when you have to start a game versus coming into a game for a series or two and playing. I still think he's going to be good. He came in with all the hype. I mean, people just have to slow down. But I think, coming in, hey, he's a Heisman candidate. Texas was preseason number 1 team in the country coming into the year. So I get all that. But again, when you only have certain packages that you go in the game for versus now you're the guy, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And, he's making a ton of NIL money.
Yeah.
You see him on a million different commercials, and I that doesn't help. That's the other thing that I thought would cause, jealousy or controversy. You have players making millions of dollars. I saw the average salary for a Power 4 starting quarterback is between $4 and $6 million. And you have other guys who are getting much less. I thought that would cause dysfunction, issues in the locker room, and we haven't seen it really happen yet. Do you think that it could be an issue down the road in the next few years?
Well, again, I'll go back to the kid, Sam Hartman. When Sam Hartman was at Wake Forest, and then he transferred to go to Notre Dame, and Dave Clawson made the comment and said, well, Dave Clawson rented him for a year, and then he went over to Notre Dame because Notre Dame paid him, the big bucks. And it's like these quarterbacks now, I'm not a big fan of the transfer portal because to me, I don't think it teaches these guys anything. It is basically the NFL. It's a business now. But it's like if a kid doesn't start and things don't go his way, well, boom, I'm going to enter the transfer portal. And I hate the end of the year, Steve, when we get into the bowl games, because some of these teams where they don't make a big bowl game, and I get it. You don't want to get hurt, potentially ruin your NFL draft stock. But these guys that opt out, and here you are, these teams, they're down to like the 4th and 5th string kids that haven't even played all year because these guys opt out. To me, it's quitting on your team, and I know it's money. You're leaving a lot of money on the table. I wasn't raised that way. I don't believe in that. But again, I've never been offered $10 million either, where I'm an injury away from probably losing that money. So I get it. I've just never been a big fan of that. I think you're just quitting on your team.
No, the opting out has been a huge issue, and I know that they're trying to prevent it because the bowl games in general have lost a lot of luster because of it. Because you have the 12-team college football playoffs, the bowl games have not been as popular and as big as they have been, although the television ratings have been good.
Right.
But yes, the opt-outs are hugely a problem. And they have to find a way to curtail that. They have to find a way to stop that. The only thing, like the NCAA, every time there's litigation, they lose. And that's how the Vanderbilt quarterback, who's basically on his 7th year, got junior college not to count because it diminished his earning potential. He was allowed to play this year. And that is a huge reason Vanderbilt's been able
7
to
years.
have success.
Can you imagine that? 7 years. 7 years.
Yeah, you're a doctor. You're a doctor. You might as well get your PhD.
Yep.
It blows my mind. And then you had the BYU quarterback, Jake Resnick. He violates the honor code, and he's already missed the transfer portal window, finds a way around it, drops out of BYU completely, and then enrolls in Tulane. Tulane takes him on. Tulane puts him on scholarship, and that circumvented the portal. So there's ways to do it. But you're absolutely right. I found playing at UConn, you come in as a freshman, and you have to learn how to fight through adversity. College football is not easy. College football is probably the hardest thing that you will ever have to do. And if you're not playing, if you're not happy with your situation, I was like you, and I was taught you work harder, you improve, you get in the weight room, you get better. You don't leave. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing that if a kid comes in 3 games into the season, he doesn't like his spot, he feels he should be playing more, he's out. They go into the portal. They want a red shirt to preserve their red shirt year. And that's the lesson that I think is terrible for them to learn. And I've talked to several mental health experts who believe that within the next 5 years, there's going to be a mental health crisis with former athletes because they've gone through the transfer portal. They've gone through being success stories, making all this money, and 1% go to the NFL.
Yep.
Not all of them are going to make it. And they're going to find themselves in a situation where, again, it's adversity. They're not going to be able to run from it like they have. They're going to have to deal with it head on, and they don't have the tools to be able to do it. So that's why he said he believes that wholeheartedly there's going to be a mental health crisis with these kids because they are treated like they are in the NFL. And after this is all over, the crowd's not going to be there. The university's not going to be there. And they're not going to have the tools to deal with it.
Nope.
It's the adversity. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head. And unfortunately, I think the mental health state today with kids, and, again, you're throwing millions of dollars at 18-year-old kids. I can't say I've ever had that kind of money. I mean, I have a really good support system the way I was raised by my family and all that.
We both do.
But, you look at Johnny Manziel and you look at Diego Pavia, you mentioned a kid from Vanderbilt, the quarterback, and they get all this money, and it's like they don't know what to do with it. But then once it's gone, you sit back and you look and say, geez, football, money, girls, parties, you had it all. Cars.
College was the best time you
everything.
lost.
And then when it's gone, it's really sad to see that all these kids that are left with nothing and don't have a really good support system. And, mental health today in all sports is troublesome because it's getting worse.
Yeah, we got a couple comments about 7-year college football players. They should be forced to get their doctorate or be a doctor.
That's crazy.
So I just wanted to mention, obviously, Syracuse in their situation. They started off hot. Their quarterback goes down. and unfortunately their season kind of unraveled. I think Fran Brown has done an exceptional job there. I think he will continue in the future. Do you see them rebounding from this year? And, it's just funny to me because all the Big East teams, a majority of them went to the ACC. They haven't had a ton of success. Syracuse has had a couple 10-win seasons. I think Fran Brown is the right guy for the job. Do you think that he can turn it around for next year?
Steve, people this way get on me so much because I picked Syracuse to start the season to go 4-8, and they said I was crazy. And it looks like
Really?
there's a really good chance they're going to go 4-8. And they always say I'm not a diehard Syracuse fan.
Yeah.
My buddy Coach Medicis is a really big Syracuse guy, and he's always like, "You're always against Syracuse." This is what I always say against Syracuse, where I struggle with. I think Fran Brown's a really good recruiter. Obviously, losing Steve Angeli. If Angeli played, do I think they'd be 3-7? Probably not. But one of the things, and I'm gonna use your UConn guys here as a success story because Syracuse beat UConn when they had Angeli, and I don't think Fran Brown's a really good developer. When I watch his teams the last 3 or 4 weeks, and again, no knock on them. I think they probably would have won 6-7 games. Some people had them 9-3 this year, 8-4. I haven't seen the team get any better.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I always say, like, you don't know, like Duke, NC State, Pitt. I always used to say Syracuse would have to win those 50-50 games. Wake Forest, NC State, then take your chances against when Florida State was really good, Miami, the top teams, the Clemsons and the ACC. I think he's a really good recruiter. Last year, I think Syracuse had an easy schedule last year.
They did, yeah.
And this year the schedule was a lot tougher. They opened up against Tennessee, and Angeli goes down, and obviously they haven't looked good. Notre Dame should hammer them this week, and then they play a 1-10 Boston College, that took Georgia Tech to the wire last week.
Yep.
So we'll see. I mean, time will tell. It's only year 2, but if Angeli comes back, which I'm sure he will. He's got to have a good year. He's got to have a good season next year.
Yeah,
they completely were in that quarterback.
They completely relied on him, and I agree. Syracuse to me is the Rutgers of the ACC. I think their ceiling is 6 wins.
I would agree with you.
Rutgers goes 5-7, 6-6, and goes to a bowl game. They're happy. They're in the Big Ten. They're never going to contend for a Big Ten title. I don't see Syracuse ever contending for an ACC title. People don't want to come up there. It's not the Dome, when you and I were growing up, the Dome was a draw.
Yeah.
The Dome was packed with 50,000 screaming people for
Yep.
Donovan McNabb. We don't have that anymore. And they have struggled to rebuild that program, rebuild the facilities. And, they've had 10-win seasons in between, but they've kind of been anomalies. When the other coach started, Dino Babers,
Yep.
he won 10 games right off the bat, and then he went downhill. Fran Brown wins 10 games his first season. Then he starts going downhill. I just don't think it's a place that you can win consistently. I
think he's a good recruiter.
Yeah.
And it is nice when you get on social media and you look at Twitter and you see these 4 or 5-star guys narrow it down to 5 teams, and you see Syracuse is one of the 5 teams. We would have probably never saw that with Coach Babers. When Fran Brown got this job, I didn't think it was a really good hire.
I didn't either.
I know my buddy Coach Medicis, who's probably watching, they love Fran Brown. And listen, he may work out, and I think it's great if he does for Syracuse to fill the Dome. But again, I think they benefited last year from an easy schedule.
Yeah, and in the ACC in general, when Clemson is down, they're not exactly a powerhouse. Everyone was touting Florida State after they beat Alabama, and look what's happened to them. And then, we've talked a little bit about UConn. UConn has benefited from not playing anyone. They being an independent, finding games. They have played teams that they've been able to be competitive with. And, they did get a good win against Duke. They got a good
Yep.
win against BC. It's the first time in years that we've had 2 wins against Power 4 conference teams, 2 Power 4 conference teams in the same year. We finish up with Florida Atlantic. But, the biggest thing with us is attendance-wise, we're not putting asses in the seats.
Mm-hmm.
To get into one of those conferences, we need 30,000 people a game. We need to generate revenue. I said we could win, 3 basketball championships in a row. It's not going to make a difference. Football right now is driving everything with the billion-dollar television contracts, with NIL, with everything that's going on, with players being able to get paid by the athletic departments. If you don't have a good football program, you're in trouble. And that's why we're seeing, schools like the University of New Haven, they moved up to Division 1A.
Yep.
You're seeing Delaware, they moved up to Division 1A because of FBS, because there's no point in playing FCS because you're not going to make money. But it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out tonight and with the playoffs and what the changes are going to be. I agree with you. Georgia definitely is going to move up. It's going to be interesting to see where Alabama goes. And it would be crazy again if the ACC doesn't get anyone in. But it's a very real possibility. This week, are there any games particular that you're looking forward to?
Well, first I got to give your guy Jim Mora a shout out because I'm a huge Jim Mora fan. I've always been a Jim Mora fan. I think what UConn fans need to be worried about is I think if Jed Fish leaves Washington for any of those jobs, I think that's the only job that Jim Mora would leave for, is to go back home to Washington where he graduated from. He played there. I think that's where he got started in coaching as a grad assistant at Washington. I think he's done a good job. I know the schedule's been a little light for them. Somebody put a post up on Twitter that I followed. I don't think it was you. It was another UConn person. They showed the stadium, how packed it was.
It was for the Duke game, yes.
And it's like, you know what? I know they haven't played a tight schedule, but you still got to win the games on the schedule.
You do.
And I think he's done a really good job. I thought he got a raw deal down at UCLA. I think he's a hell of a coach. Hopefully he'll stick around because I do think he's a winner. But you asked me about the game. There's one game that I'm looking forward to. I mentioned the USC-Oregon game. USC is going to go down to Oregon. Oregon's a 9.5-point favorite in that game. I really think that Lincoln Riley has finally adapted to, the Lincoln Riley offenses of the past have been, let's throw the ball 30, 40 times a game. He's running the ball a lot more this year. The game against Iowa, and it was a torrential downpour.
Oh, it was awful.
They pounded the ball, and they found a way to run the football and play defense. I really think they got a shot to beat Oregon, and if they win this week, I think they get to the playoff, and I think they'll punch their ticket. And then the other game I'm looking forward to, I think, is the Pitt game. Everybody had the Pat Narduzzi comments when they played Notre Dame and said Notre Dame can beat us 100-0 as long as we win the next 2. Well, he's got to go to Georgia Tech this week, and if they win out, there's a chance Pitt plays for the ACC title. So we'll see what happens, but I'm really looking forward to the USC Oregon game this week.
Yeah, I think USC Oregon's great, and I agree with you. Lincoln Riley has adapted to kind of the Big Ten mentality. He's running the football more. They're being more physical up front. They're knocking teams around. And I think for sure they absolutely can go into Oregon and they can beat Oregon. And that would propel them. And they would do some damage. And it's good for him because he's had a few rough years. I'd love to see him have success. I don't want to see any more coaches get fired. We've had enough coaches get fired.
They're just going to get recycled.
You're 100% right about Mora. If Fish goes to UCLA, Mora would jump at the Washington job, and I think he'll be offered it because the transformation at UConn, if we win this weekend, it'll be the first time that we have had back-to-back 9-win seasons in school history. So he's got to get credit for that. But great job for our first show. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, man. Listen, I appreciate you having me on. Anytime we get a chance to talk college
Yeah,
football,
absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Let me know. I'm more than happy to come on. You do a great job. I follow you on all social media platforms, man. So keep up.
You do too. You do too. It's great that we have local content creators because we need them. There's not enough coverage in this area. I always say that. And we need people like us to really give the area attention and talk sports because it has to be built up. It has to be built up because radio isn't doing it. Podcasting is how it's the way of the world. It's how you build an audience, how you build a following. And I think that's exactly what we're going to be able to do. So great job. Thank you, Rocky, for having you on. It's been a pleasure. I look forward to seeing how things shake out and talking next week. So
Sounds
for
good, man.
Rocky Corigliano of the Rock Pile, I'm Steve Cully, the best podcast host in the universe. Remember, when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Take 2 oranges, throw them right back at life.